Hi, I'm James from Borussia Dortmund English, and this is the Echte Liebe podcast. Firstly, I would just like to apologise if I sound awful. I've not been well. In fact, I'm blaming it on the game on Saturday. The stress that I had over 1.5 hours seemed to hit me, as shortly after that evening, I sadly went downhill. And no, there was absolutely zero alcohol involved. Who said being a football fan was fun? Honestly, this has gone from what I thought would be the easiest episode I've recorded to date to being the hardest. This was the one out of all of them that was meant to write itself. The previous 10 were a mixture of game analysis, news, and just my personal take on what's happening at the time, but right now I'm struggling, as I know every single one of you are. I remember the very first podcast that I recorded, and I said a line in there about how we as Borussia Dortmund fans seem to experience things together that bond us like no other set of supporters. At the time, I was referring to the transfer policy, and that every 2 years we have to say goodbye to a player that had stolen our hearts. But this time it was a painstaking and heartbreaking scenario that many of us thought could happen, but let's be honest, none of us really thought would. All in all, the season finished in the same pattern that we had set out ourselves. Whenever we'd had the initiative or the advantage, whenever we've had it in our own hands, this ugly face reared itself from the shadows and gave it all back to Bayern. It's happened repeatedly. It's broken us all again and again until it finally destroyed us all on the final day of the season. I really didn't think I'd be able to do an episode this week. One, because I don't think people really want to hear about what happened, or even worse, relive it all over again. But just from a personal standpoint and simply just not knowing what to say. Then I thought about the yellow wall and what I witnessed after the final whistle. I knew that if those fans could react and show the solidarity that they did after witnessing what they just had, then I had no excuse in avoiding it. I mean, what's there to say about the actual game that anybody wants to hear again? I think a lot of us have already looked past the match itself because more than any game this season, once it had finished, it didn't have any relevance anymore. The performance in the first half reminded me of the game against RB Leipzig in the DFB Pokal. That's how bad it was. We had another show of incredible bravery from Haller, and if he'd managed to put the penalty away, then it just goes on the list of all the other maybes. Maybe we should have had another penalty. Maybe Malen should have turned in that cross shot. Maybe Roy should have scored with that header. And maybe we should have been German champions for the first time in 11 years. It wasn't to be. It was cruel, it was painful. And it will take a long time to get over this one for both the fans and the players. The only thing I can be assured of is that come the start of next season, the Westfalenstadion will be sold out for every home game. The optimism and hope for the new season will have returned, and with the recruitment being led by Sebastian Kehl and Edin Terzic, we'll be ready to do it all over again. So where do we go from here? When looking at the transfer rumours and possible recruitment, I think it's clear that the club were already on a course long before this result. As I record this, nothing has yet been announced by the club, although that looks set to change imminently. But we seem to have signed and agreed all personal terms for both Ben Sebaini and Edson Alvarez. Other names that are being linked with the club are Enzo Lefebvre and Marvin Duksch. It's very strange for BVB fans to hear that they are being linked with 23-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 28 and 29-year-olds. We know that the recruitment model over the last 10 years has been to buy young players with an extremely high ceiling. The Dembélés, Sanchos, Haalands and Bellinghams have pretty much financed the club with their sales, or possible sales when it comes to Jude. They've kept us relevant when our results on the pitch wouldn't have, and we've been the envy of all of the top European clubs time and time again. The issue that we've had with this model is that not a single one of them has turned and said, "This is where I see my long-term future." If that was to happen, then we'd have a focal point to build around. We would attract better players in general and switch from being a selling club to a genuine giant on the field. Yet even with all of the badge kissing and shows of unity, they eventually leave and either fade away or bring a success that we as Borussia Dortmund fans could only ever dream of. Just ask Manchester City fans. We still have a handful of gems on the books. I still believe that a fit and healthy Bino Gittins will have a ceiling higher than Gio Reyna. And if Duranville's performance on Saturday is anything to go by, he may well have one higher than all that's gone before him. What we really lack is a solid core. A core that isn't in its early to mid-30s that have already won everything elsewhere. I believe the signing of Kobel and Sula were the start of that, although that you can argue Sula has won everything elsewhere. He's in his mid-20s and BVB was his first and only choice. Now let's forget age and potential for a moment. Let's look at one attribute that you'd ask from any player when signing for any football club in the world. What would it be? Quite simply, it would be that they want to be there. It's clear the young players we sign want to be here, but it's not because they see it as their big move. No. They want to be here because they know that this club more than any gets the spotlight shined on them like no other. We are a stepping stone and it's as cold and as harsh as that. When Bayern find a Kimmich, a Davies, a Muller, a Musiala, a Lahm, a Schweinsteiger, the list goes on, you get my point. They are there to stay. They are there to reach the pinnacle of their careers with that team. And trust me, saying what I just said with what we've all just experienced was very difficult. But it's the truth. Money plays a huge part and we have nowhere near the resources that they do in order to keep those players. For example, Bayern have their spending might. And if we are classed as the number 2 challenger, then compare that to the English Premier League, where Chelsea can spend 600 million and finish 12th. That is what we're up against. The other top 4 leagues don't have that huge financial gap from their top team to even their next 3 to 4 direct challengers. Yet we are worlds apart. The way you combat that is simply by buying players that first of all see a move to Borussia Dortmund as their big and final move. We must seek out player profiles that are a balance between wanting to be here, that haven't quite reached their full potential and that fit into a budget of no more than 30 to 40 million pounds per player. And don't get me wrong, we'll only sign one of those at that price every summer. The rest will be anywhere between 10 and 20 million. And in today's inflated market, that's a good championship player in England. To get the edge, we have to be ahead of everyone else. Find small advantages that mean we can compete at the highest possible level. And for that to result in some successes along the way. There's no doubt that we'll continue to pick up the young investment type players within that. But the core is what must stay the same. And with Mats Hummels and Marco Reus heading into what will most likely be their last season in the Schwarzgelben, that new core will be more important than ever. As the season has come to a close and we are left with the what ifs, hows and whys, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you all for listening to myself over the last 11 episodes. At times it's been hard for us all, but if there's anything I can count on, it's that the Borussia Dortmund fans are one of a kind, and they'll support and stick together like no other set of fans that I've ever come across. We'll need to take that into next season. There'll be a hangover from that last day like no other, and rightfully so. We as fans are currently getting ridiculed and destroyed on social media. Just check out the Borussia Dortmund English Facebook page if you want to know how bad it is. But the players will be feeling this just as much as we are. They'll need to find a way of taking it and using it as a motivation to do something special next year. Sometimes that's what this sport does. It's already written, like Messi winning the World Cup. The way I see it is that Marco signed that 1-year extension for a reason. one that we didn't all understand at the time. And that reason is because this year, the footballing gods said it wasn't his time. And so next year, I'm expecting something truly special to happen. If you have managed to get this far in the show, then I'd like to say a huge thank you. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button, and if you want to support the show, you can become a Borussia Dortmund English member via the Patreon page. And this really does make a difference. So again, thank you. I'll put all of the links below, but for now and for the last time this season, I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. I will be continuing the podcast throughout the off-season with news, transfers and everything BVB, and I'll see you all on the pages over the summer. Take care everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Echte Liebe podcast.